If there was one thing that I could study for the rest of my life, it would probably be books. But if there was two things, they would be books and art. This is the books and art tag. I was tagged by Daniela at Uncommon Reader, and this is an original tag that she created. Daniela created this original tag to celebrate her first year on BookTube. I was tagged months ago and I'm just super behind, but I wanted to do this tag. It's such an interesting one, and I wanted to go and look at all of the art that she mentions in this tag. Each prompt has a painting to go with it, and there are 7 different prompts. The first one is, the painting is The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog by Caspar David Friedrich. The prompt is, a book that focuses or explores solitude. And I immediately thought of The Last Man by Mary Shelley, which is a book that I was wanting to read for quite a while, and I got a chance to read it last year. While the main character only spends a short time in actual solitude, people are dropping like flies in this book. It is all about the end of humanity. And throughout the story, more and more and more people are dying off. Till it gets to the point where there's just one guy left. And then at the end of the book talks a little bit about his time on Earth all by himself and what he experiences. And then it ends. There's a lot of emotions that are built around the fear of what would happen if you were the last person on Earth. It's a very interesting, psychologically weird book that could have been about a fourth of its size and still been great. It's pretty wordy, but if you can realize that you are in the early 19th century and just kind of get past it, you'll probably really enjoy it. Prompt number 2. The painting is Cherubs by Raphael. The prompt is, a book with supernatural protagonists. So I don't read a lot of fantasy, but I am thinking of a duology by Frank Peretti. It's classic Christian fiction, and that is This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness. Both of those books have to do with angels and demons and the spiritual warfare that is happening all around us in a realm that we cannot see. My daughter, who is 19, was actually just talking about this the other day, and she's like, those books freaked me right out. If you believe that world is real, then yeah, it will very much affect you. But they are pretty great stories that I probably should reread again because it's been a really long time. Prompt number 3. Moscow by Kandinsky, a book set in the future, sci-fi or dystopic. And I chose Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. The thing that I loved about Station 11, it was actually my first dystopia that I've ever read, but it was a hopeful dystopia. I was pulled in from the very beginning, and every character in this book is shown both on a good side and an evil side. You see both sides of their character. Each one of them made me feel compassion for them. So there's a group of people and they're basically on a journey. The world has, gone through an apocalypse, and they're on a journey to reach a place where they have heard maybe has better resources or just a better atmosphere, or there's a lot of other people there and they want to go there and meet up with some people that they know and whatever. So they're kind of on this journey, and it just kind of gives you a picture of what that would look like and what the world would look like, and the sort of things that they would face, but all just very hopeful. It wasn't a negative book, really. I loved that the people had revived the old creativity. At one point they passed a building that used to be an old Wendy's, and they have replaced the door with a old wooden door that they had found, and then someone had taken the time to carve on it and make very intricate, pretty carvings all over the door. Probably because they had time to do stuff like that. When life shuts down and everything changes, right? You have time for creativity like that. And that was one of the things that I really loved, was seeing that was part of the hope of this new world that they were living in, where they were doing more creative and beautiful things. They either had the time or took the time because they recognized the importance of it. Number 4, the prompt is, a book with a special bond between mother and daughter. So the book that I had written down, so I actually wrote notes for this tag quite a few months ago and then just am getting to recording it now. And at the time, The book I wrote was When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer. And that book tells a story of a girl who has inherited, gosh, I can't even remember exactly the details, but she's inherited some kind of a gene that allows her to embody two different bodies on two different timelines, but it's just her one personality, her one consciousness. And so she kind of flips back and forth between timelines. So in this one, she's in like colonial America and like the 19-teens, Gilded Age sort of like New York scene. And her mother, she inherited this from her mother, right? So her mother had the same thing. I think on her 21st birthday, 22nd, somewhere in there, she has to decide which timeline she wants to live in, and then that's the one she will sort of be sealed in forever. Her mother had to do the same thing and made that decision years before, and then now she must make that decision also. And so the bond between her and her mother is really strong, and weirdly she has two mothers. Right? The mother in colonial times and the mother in the 19-teens. But the one in the colonial times is the one that carries the same gene as she does, and they are very close. I have since stopped reading and recommending this series just because I don't know, there's a little moral weirdness to me that we have a character who has the same consciousness. She is the same person inside, even though she has different bodies in different timelines. And she has relationships with men in different timelines. And I just really have a problem with that because she has the one consciousness, right? So it's her in multiple relationships. And in this story, specifically, in one timeline, she ends up being married. And in another timeline, she is in love with somebody else. And I just wasn't okay with that. And it's just gotten really morally weird there for me. And so that actually started up in book number 2. And I was like, you know what? There's 3 of you now. So there's 3 versions of her in book number 2. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't working for me morally, right? So I don't recommend that series anymore, but it did have a good mother and daughter relationship on the one that I read. All right, number 5, the painting is The Swing by Renoir, and the book, or the prompt says, a book that reminds you of your childhood. For that, it would be From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by E.L. Konigsberg. That book I read so many times as a kid, and I just thought it would be so amazing. I guess, funnily enough, that one is also, that one is related to art, also just like this tag is, because a little girl and a little boy, brother and sister, they run away from home and they go live in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And they come out at night and they view all the paintings and they do all the stuff, whatever. And then by day, right, they got to hide away. And gosh, now that I'm talking about it, I really want to go read that again. I think I might, because this is framed in September, right? So books about art. And it's also Shorty September, and it's a short story. I mean, relatively, right? It's a kid's book. Oh, I am so motivated now. I want to go read that. All right, next one is The Painting is American Gothic by Wood Grant, and the prompt says a book set in a rural area. So I was thinking about the book Small Favors by Erin something. I'll put it here for you. I read that book maybe in June, I think. Maybe July. And it's really the only fantasy book that I have read, like secular fantasy book that I've probably ever read, besides maybe like The Princess Bride. But I really did like it. I thought it had some really good themes. It wasn't meant to be spiritually like Christian, theologically, whatever. But it really was. It had a lot of Christian themes in it, I thought. And it was set in a rural area where people of this town, if they leave the town, really bad things happen to them. And so they kind of have to stay in the town. They can't even go into the woods. And so it just tells about people who did go to the woods and what happened to them. And then eventually they are trying to fight what's in the woods. So it turned out to be just a really cool story that I never really thought about picking up. I've never really even gone into the, fantasy section of the bookstore or been interested in any of that, but somebody in the past talked about that book on one of her videos, and I was like, I think I want to check that out. And the cover was so pretty, and I am glad that I read that. I didn't keep it, so I can't show it to you guys, but number 7, the prompt is a book with a female protagonist ahead of her time or a pioneer. And for that one, it would be The Moonlight School by Suzanne Woods Fisher. This book I read maybe last spring, and it was totally a spontaneous read for me. I was actually unhauling a bunch of books, and when I went on to paperbackswap.com to list them like I normally do with all my unhauled books, because you can trade books on there and stuff, I saw that like 38 people were wishing for it, and I was like, okay, maybe this is a good book if this many people are wishing for it. And so I did just actually stop right there and started reading it. And I got to like page 40 before I realized I should probably finish what I'm doing here and then continue reading this book. I really got into it super fast. It tells a fictional story based on history. The actual woman from history is named Cora Wilson Stewart. And in Rowan County, Kentucky, in the early 1900s, like 19 teens, she was really promoting education there and doing a lot to help educate the people of that county in that area. And so in the story, her like niece or something comes to town and gets employed by Cora to go up into the mountains and act as a scribe for people to help them write letters to their loved ones who live elsewhere. And as she does that, she learns, compassion and understanding and kind of just about people that are not like her, as she came from the city and was, very well taken care of and wealthy and all those sorts of things, didn't have a lot of issues. And so she goes up into the hill country and meets with people who do struggle through life more than she does, and opens her eyes to just a lot of things about that. The Moonlight School is a real thing, and I guess this woman really fought the area, people in charge to educate the people because they were afraid of losing their cultural their history, their cultural ways, and that's totally understandable, right? And they didn't want this new way coming in. They didn't want to lose, what it was special to them. And so I think there was a lot of butting heads and things over time, but eventually they were able to establish these schools. And one of the big things that they talked about that I never really thought about was the fact that the people couldn't read their own legal documents. So someone could come in with papers to take over their land and tell them it said something else, and they just would sign an X, right? Because they couldn't sign their own name. And then later, when they realize that, their area is being mined or it's being, raised and new things being built or whatever's going on in the land, they had no legal recourse. They couldn't fight and they couldn't claim that they didn't know what they were doing because they signed the paper. But they were very much taken advantage of in a lot of legal ways. And so one of the benefits of this was just to help them to actually have a better way of keeping track of keeping their culture together, right? And so anyway, it was a really interesting story. I learned a lot from it. All right, and then the bonus question is, what's your favorite painting or art? Create a prompt to match your art with a book title. So my favorite artist is Johannes Vermeer. I actually had the chance to see one of his paintings when my daughter and I went to the National Gallery in London in May of 2024. And I didn't even know it was there, but we had seen a few things, and then we went to sit down for lunch, and I was just thinking all of a sudden, I was like, I wonder if there's a Vermeer here. And she looked it up, and sure enough, there were 2 of them. Only one of them was on display at the time. And so we were able to go and see, and it was just one of the most special things. The room was packed out with people, of course. And so it was hard to get to because it was really tiny. But, and I didn't realize that actually it would be so tiny. So it was interesting. But it was a really cool experience to get to see that. He is known for using blue and yellow and light, and usually light is kind of like shining in from a window on one side, and that's usually what you see in his paintings, is that light shining in. And so I will talk about a book that has the theme of a light shining in the darkness, and that would be an entire series and group of series, anything written by the author Connie Cossette. She writes biblical fiction like I have never read before. It is fantastic. Her stories are full of hope. They are biblically accurate and they are not cheesy. She writes about Old Testament stories and just brings them to life. They're very biblically accurate, and I will always promote anything she ever comes out with. They're really fantastic, and they all are just full of that whole theme of light shining into dark places. I especially love the series that she wrote about the cities of refuge. I think there's 3 books in the Cities of Refuge series, and they're all about the biblical cities of refuge and what it would have been like there and how hard it would have been to get there for someone who was fleeing from someone who was out to kill them, right? All right, that's it. The only other thing I need to do is tag some people, which I will do in the description box. I hope you guys enjoyed this tag video. Make sure and go over and check out Daniela's channel. She's one of my favorites. She's always talking about books that I've never heard of before. She lives in Italy and she has just so many interesting things to share. So if you are not familiar with Daniela at Uncommon Reader, make sure and check her out. Hope you guys are having a good day. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.